human, but I'm really just a guy that did what you do for a long time and picked up some skills along the way. And my goal is really just for you guys to leave knowing something more than you did when you logged on. So hopefully that's the case for everybody. As he said, today we're going to be talking about the mission aligned, data driven approach to strategic communication. Um, I think that some of you guys may have been in my introductory course for the mission aligned, data driven approach at the conference last year. And basically, that's just the framework for everything that we do. It's just an integration of Roma and Lean and Six Sigma PNP, Hoshin Canry, Agile Scrum, and some other methodologies. And I've actually expanded on this framework since I was with you last time. We now include 7 steps that are built around the word inspire. So it stands for identity, navigation, strategy, performance, inspection, reporting, and enrichment. And so today we're going to be focusing on the word reporting. So I want to take just a minute and break down the title of today's session. This is a part of our mission line data driven framework, but we were very strategic in picking out this title more than just being part of a series. And so I want to kind of break this down for you a minute. First of all, we have the word communication. And I think this is pretty easy. Most of us get this because it's something that we do all day, every day. So it's just defined as the imparting or exchanging of information. But I'm not here just to talk about general communication. I want to talk to you about strategic communication. One of my favorite classes when I was in school was on strategic communication. And as a communication major, I actually took a lot of classes that drilled down on what that means. But strategic communication is different than just general communication because we're careful to make sure that the information exchanged leads to a specific purpose. And this is very common in marketing because companies don't want to waste their resources just throwing out a variety of messages and hoping that one will actually stick and bring in a return. They're very intentional at understanding who they need to communicate with and making sure the message is right so that they can hit the target on the first try. And there's a little bit of lag in our video, so just ignore that that lag is there. I'm in a hotel room at another conference, so not great internet service here. All right, so the purpose that we're talking about today is defined in the next part of today's title, mission aligned. So this means that we're giving support to the organization's mission, which should be the bottom line for all of us. And so when we add this to the definition of strategic communication, it reads carefully imparting or exchanging information to support achievement of the mission. And then finally, we can't forget the data driven component. So when we add that in, we end up with my goal for you guys today. I want you to learn how to use analyze data to carefully impart or exchange information to support achievement of your organization's mission. And I honestly don't expect that you guys will get everything that you need to do this right in an hour, but hopefully it'll get you thinking about why it's important so that you can start integrating some of these techniques in your agency. All right, so when we start talking about organizational communication, I usually split up into two different major categories, internal and external. With internal communication, I'm generally talking about leadership and human resources and conflict resolution, things like that. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the basics associated with external communication. And if you've ever been a part of my trainings in the past, you'll note that one of the things I always like to do is start with the why factor. And the reason I do this is because I've learned when people understand why things are important, that they're more likely to embrace the content. So let's look at why we should care about this subject first. I'm going to take you back to the year 1970. Donald Rumsfeld was the director of the Office of Economic Opportunity at the time. And it was during his term that Instruction 6320-1 was released. And if you've been in a Roma training, you know that this is where we find the mission of community action. If you have not been in an introduction to Roma training, talk to the Cal Kappa folks and they'll get you hooked up with one of us Roma nerds. But anyway, the mission of the network, if you'll notice here, is not focused on the provision of services. In fact, it's not even focused on the achievement of outcomes, but it's about making the community more responsive to the problem of poverty. And so he goes on to say that the effectiveness of a community action agency, or the way that we measure success, is not by the services we provide, but more importantly, or more important than our services, we measure success based on the improvements and changes that we make in the attitudes that people in our communities have toward the poor. And that's a pretty big calling, especially in today's society. And it's not even just about them not hating people who are living in poverty, but we want them to care enough that they invest in our work. We were never intended just to spend our CSBG money and our LIHEAP money and our Head Start money every year, keep our heads down while maintaining compliance. That's not who we are. That's a lot of times what we do, but we were actually created to get people engaged in fixing the problem. And the way that we do this is through strategic communication. Now, this is so important to me that I actually went back to school to get a degree in communication. Okay, I originally went to school to study computer science way back in the day. Many of my certifications are in the field of analytics, but the more I looked at the mission of community action, the more I realized that we need to do more of this. So I went back to school, and this is just, it's something that we don't do. Okay, my wife decided she would join me, and so she added a degree in business focused on HR to her nursing degree. And I'm thrilled she's now on our team full time, sharing some of her expertise with our customers. And it's really kind of awesome being able to work with her every day as well. But back to today's topic. If you guys have been in my other sessions, you have more than likely heard me talk about some of these folks: Peter Drucker, Abraham Maslow, Lee Cockrell, Richard Branson, Brene Brown. These are some of the greats who have shaped the way that we think about leadership and business and connection, and some of the heroes of mind in operations. But today, I want to introduce you guys to somebody else, a guy by the name of Wilbur Schramm. And I know his name doesn't get thrown around quite as much as those others, but he's a pretty big deal in the world of communication. You see, Schramm is basically to communication what Drucker is to business, or what Maslow is to psychology. He's a key figure in helping us understand how communication works. And if you think about it, that's pretty important, because everything that we do in our lives revolves around communication. Now, Schramm developed a model that's simple, but incredibly powerful. And he breaks down communication into a few key components that can help us understand how to communicate more effectively. And so we're going to be walking through his model today. And I want you to watch as we go through this. It's not even just about what you're saying, but how you're saying it and how it's being received. So we'll kick off after we pause for quick questions. I'm curious, how many of you guys have developed a communication strategy in your organization? I see one hand. If you don't care, type it into the chat box there so I can see. I saw Savannah. Oh, awesome. Cal Kappa has one. Okay, Cap K Kern. Okay, so we got a few guys out there with them. All right, so I'm going to go through this and we'll kind of look at the different elements, and I'll be kind of going back to that. I want to see what you guys feel about this, and if there are things that you did that were different, or if you have additional suggestions that may help others on the call as well. So I'm going to kick off with Schramm's model. The first step of the model is to identify the person that we're communicating with. And this is what we call the receiver. Now, for the mission aligned data driven approach and the Inspire model, this ties directly to the reporting phase, where we start with the question, who? And it's who can help us achieve the agency's mission, because we always want to go back to the organizational mission. And this is where things get interesting, because we're not just thinking about who's going to hear us, but who can actually act on what we're communicating. And I usually suggest starting with some high level categories, people or groups who have influence or the resources to support the organization's mission. So, for example, politicians are always a good place to begin. They have power to make changes, they can influence policy, they can even secure funding for your programs. Local businesses are another one. These folks can be allies in everything from partnerships to sponsorships, local organizations. A lot of these guys are already on the ground doing the work that complements your mission. They may even be plugged into the same issues that you're working on. So aligning with them is honestly a no brainer. And then after that, we look at community members. These are the people in your community who live and breathe the challenges that you're working to solve. So there's definitely more, but let's start with these. I think that most of us would probably agree that these categories would be important for us to communicate with in order to be effective in fulfilling the agency's purpose. But it's not just enough to identify these groups. We need to understand them so that we know how to engage them. So we have to be strategic in how we communicate so that we're not just speaking at them, but we are getting them to take action to support what we're trying to achieve. Now, one way to do this is to learn about their demographics. And these can be collected through public data, through general research, or even agency surveys. You can just add a few additional questions to your community assessment surveys, and that will go a long way to help you develop a good communication strategy. And I think that most of you guys are probably familiar with demographics because we just do that in this network. But usually we think about the basics: age, race, ethnicity, gender. These are all important, but there's some other factors I want to hit on today that I think can help us to develop better plans. The first one is language. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Florida talking about how to use artificial intelligence to implement Roma. And I was being cute, which ended up not being so cute. But I was being cute and I was trying to show how you could translate with artificial intelligence. And so I put the phrase, I'm a sexy man, into AI and I asked it to translate it into 7 random languages. And there's a friend of mine down there that works at the agency in Orange County. And most people don't know that he's Russian, but he is because he doesn't have an accent. His family left when he was like 13 or something, but he can fluently read and speak Russian. And so when I told him that, or when I put that on the board, he just put his head down and he said, "That's not what that says." He said, "There's not a word for sexy in Russian." So it said I'm a sexual man instead of I'm a sexy man. So I learned a lesson. I learned a lesson there. Um, but language is important, and making sure that we translate language is important. So definitely want to consider the languages as a part of our communication plan because it's going to make sure that we're able to reach them appropriately and consider the cultural differences in language as well. The next demographic we look at is geographic location. And this one's important because where your audience lives can also impact how you communicate with them. People in different areas have different needs and different challenges, and even communication preferences. So, if you're working with people in a big city, the communication style, the way that you reach them, may be completely different than the way that you reach them in the rural areas. So, knowing where your audience is located helps you to tailor your message in a way that resonates with them. Occupational status can be important because knowing what people do for a living can tell you a lot about their priorities and their time, and even the kind of messages that they might respond to. Education levels can shape how you craft your message. The way you communicate with, and then even the language that you use should reflect the audience's level of understanding. So you don't want to talk over someone's head, but you also don't want to underestimate the audience's knowledge. I was just talking a minute ago. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, And I have found that in some areas I have to fully embrace that, or I am just totally written off as an educated snob. Um, in other audiences, I have to distance myself because people think I'm stupid. And it's really hard to get away from the Appalachian accent, which you guys probably hear in my voice. But yeah, it's very interesting. Even my family, um, I have to be careful because I talk about my educational credentials in front of my family. They see me as an outsider in a lot of cases. So it's very interesting in the mountains. Very different world, but huge balance. And then economic status can be a big one in this network. Of course, we know that people's financial situations directly impact their access to resources and their day-to-day expenses and their needs. And so when we're communicating, we need to be sensitive to those realities. If you're speaking to people in lower economic brackets, your message might focus more on immediate benefits and how a program could help them today. Um, if the audience is more affluent, the message could lean towards the long term impact. So, knowing that economic status is going to help you make sure you're communicating what's relevant to them and what resonates with where they are in life. And finally, we have family structure. Are you talking to single parents, extended families? Maybe it's a group of young adults without kids or older folks who have their children moved off and grown. And each of these family structures comes with different concerns and different priorities. So it's important to know this. A single parent is going to have different time constraints, say, than an empty nester. So when you understand your audience's family dynamics, you can understand their needs and how to communicate them with them as well. All right. As we said, demographics are pretty well known, but some of you may not be familiar with the word psychographics. So demographics tell you more about who your audience is. Psychographics helps you understand what's important to them so that you can create a message that really resonates with their beliefs and behaviors. So first, we look at values. And values are the core principles that guide a person's behavior. When you understand what people value, then you can align your message with those principles. Next, we have beliefs, and beliefs can be tied to values, but they're more about the specific ideas or convictions that people hold. And these can be influenced by culture or religion or personal experiences, even the media. And knowing your audience's beliefs can help you to anticipate how they might respond to your message. Motivations are another critical piece. So think about what drives your audience to action. Attitudes are a little bit different because they reflect on how people feel about certain issues and situations or even your organization. So we want to keep that in mind. Lifestyles, how they spend their time, this can influence how they consume information and how they interact with your message. Are they always on the go? Do they spend time volunteering? So knowing this helps you to meet them where they are. Next, community engagement. Are they active in civic groups, religious organizations, volunteer efforts? The more engaged they are, the more likely they are to respond positively to communication that taps into their sense of duty. So that's something to consider. And then finally, media consumption habits. And this one is key for understanding how to reach your audience. And we'll talk about this more in just a minute. But you want to see, do they get their news online or through social media, or are they more likely to tune into traditional media like TV or newspapers? So we want to make sure that we're going to where they are and not expecting them to come to where you are. So by understanding both the demographics and psychographics of the audience, we can begin to break our target population into smaller groups, which allows us to tailor our message a little bit more effectively. So let's take a look at some of this. So instead of just saying general politicians, if we break them down into Democrats and Republicans, I think we can be more effective because each group has different priorities and different visions for the community. So we don't want to lie, okay? But we want to find out what it is that resonates with the group, because you can say a totally different message to Democrats and to Republicans, both of them true, but you go find out which one of those is going to resonate with the group so that they care about what you're doing. When we look at businesses, we can break down the message to small businesses versus corporate. Small business may be more concerned about your impact on the community, where a corporation may just be looking for an opportunity to get their branding information out. Local organizations, these can be broken into categories like schools and faith-based and social services. And the way that we approach each of these could be a little bit different. And even as you start digging into these categories, you'll see that different types of schools or maybe different denominations of churches may require separate plans as well. And then finally, when it comes to community members, we may want to consider customers and low-income individuals that were not served by the agency, as well as the general public. And the strategy to communicate with people who are already being served really may be different from those who are not being served by your organization. And the messaging for general public is probably going to be completely different from those with low income. So while the who factor may seem simple, the more you start thinking about it, the more you start digging, the more nuanced it becomes. And we need to consider these smaller groups within the larger categories to make sure that our communication is truly effective. So I'm going to pause again and just see, is there any discussion or any questions about this? Did any of you guys really dig in there when you started doing? I just saw your comment, Anthony. She said, I bet you make great moonshine.
My mom home near the Appalachian Mountain or the Appalachian Trail. So in that area, there's definitely a lot of moonshine going on.
I did not learn how to make moonshine growing up. However, on my mother's side, I come from a line of coal miners, and on my dad's side, I do come from a line of moonshiners. So it runs in the family. I just never got the skill. So yes, I will share the slide deck with you guys. But any other comments or anything that you guys have done that maybe have created a communication plan when trying to find out who to communicate with?
Thank you, Sean. I just want to speak real quickly to how important I'm glad you're shedding light on this, because it's so extremely important for us to know our audience, and to make sure that we're not just speaking from what we think, out of our own minds, our audience wants to hear, but actually taking a look and getting granular with it and understanding where these people are coming from with their perspectives and their experiences, and using that to fuel our communication is so important for it to be effective.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Anybody else?
I appreciate the part about not dumbing down the language in some aspects too, because I remember years ago we had somebody that was doing a presentation at our local homeless shelter, and they were just, I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but we actually had a couple guys that were there that were laid off from the NASA. So obviously their education level was much higher, but the presenter made it just like everybody was stupid. And so it was extremely uncomfortable for some of us that were there. So I appreciate that input.
And
that's a good point.
I like the point that was made earlier about the way, because I didn't consider, lifestyle of the audience, even though you're talking to politicians, let's just say, but you have to kind of consider, as you say, all these other factors into who they are. And so it's like, okay, where did this guy grow up? Where did he go to school? What is his mindset? And what kind of language do I need in order for this person to hear me? So even though you have the standard language of the industry, you still want to communicate, you want to connect with the person that's going to impact or influence whatever it is you're, trying to communicate, even so that they understand what you're saying, so that they can, when they reshare it, they will stay on your point. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and I will tell you, that's something that I worked in George's network for a really long time. And that's something that we were very intentional about is anytime we got a new governor, we would always see what his pet projects were. So we had one that was foster kid. So we knew that was a big talking point. We start looking at our strategy as a state association. We always took those numbers of how many foster kids, we had served and the impact that we'd had on those kids. Then you get another one coming in that's worries about veterans. So you take those numbers. It's not that you don't do the other things, but you want to speak the language of the person that you're talking to because that's important. That's how you get support, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. And that's really what David does, Bradley, that is. Not your David. I'm not sure. I've known David for a long time. I'm not sure what his communication strategy is. Love him to death, but he's just David.
Yeah, he finds a way. I think that's
yeah, he does. All right, I'm going to move on. One of the tools that I like to use when I create a communication plan is something called a persona. Some of you guys may be familiar with this, but it's also something I started including in the community assessments that I develop because to me, it just brings the target populations to life. And basically, a persona is just a semi-fictional character that represents a group of people in the real world. And so when you use a persona, you can tailor the message in a way that feels personal and relevant to the population that you're trying to reach. So I'm going to give you an example. This is Commissioner John Smith. He's a persona I developed for community leaders in a suburban area. He's 52 years old, aligns with Republican values, and emphasizes fiscal responsibility and limited government. So right away, we can start thinking about how we need to frame our message when communicating with somebody like John. We know that a message focused on cutting costs, increasing efficiency, or supporting local businesses might resonate with him more than, say, expanding government programs. Okay. John has a master's degree in public administration, which tells us he's well educated and likely appreciates data-driven, results-oriented approaches. And this ties into some of the concepts we talked about earlier. And if we want John's support, we'll need to highlight the impact and cost of our programs to demonstrate that we're more than just a welfare entity. Next, John is married with 3 children. He's actively involved in community groups and his church. So this gives us a glimpse into his personal life, which means messages that touch on family values and community involvement may resonate more strongly with him. John also prefers traditional media and is particularly active on LinkedIn. So this is key information on thinking about how to reach him. And then finally, John's biggest challenges is balancing the budget constraints with effective community service provision. And this gives us a clear indicator of what matters most to him and how we can frame our message to address those concerns. So if we want to propose a program, we need to demonstrate how it can deliver maximum impact at the lowest possible cost. And if you can't show how much it costs, then it's going to turn him off. Okay. And also return on investment would be pretty big thing to talk about to somebody like this. So as you can see, just creating a persona like this can help us to craft our message. And considering the demographics and the psychographics and key challenges, we can tailor our message effectively. And I've been through a lot of training on how to do personas. That's one of the things you do in marketing and communication. And I know some of you guys have been through those training sessions as well. But if you are struggling with that, this is an area that I would recommend to dip your toes into the world of ChatGPT or other AI software. And so really all you have to do is to take the demographics and psychographics that you collect and put them into an AI tool like ChatGPT, and then simply tell it to create a persona based on the information you collected. And it'll look at the most common elements and help you to create a persona that's got those core traits. And we were talking earlier, I do some training on AI prompt engineering. If this is something you guys want to learn more about, feel free to reach out, and I'm more than happy to help you all to dip your toes in a little bit deeper. All right. Quick question. Have you guys used personas before?
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in. I have
Yeah.
for other business purposes, and it's extremely helpful. Like the way I look at it is, if you don't have that, you're ineffective.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think they're awesome for the needs assessment. So I'll put this like right under my key findings. I'll have the personas of the population, and it has really transformed to me the way that the community assessments are perceived. So just something to think about. All right. Now that we have established who our target audiences are, we come to the second question, which is why. Why do we need to communicate with each persona? And the why is going to be different for each audience or persona that we've identified. And so understanding that is the key to creating the right message. So, for example, when we're communicating with a politician, our why might be to gain political support or something like that. On the other hand, when we speak to a local business, the why might be to secure financial support. For local organizations, we might just be looking for opportunities to work together. And community members, there's actually probably several reasons. We may want them to volunteer or to donate or participate in our programs, maybe just to be advocates for our cause. So it's really important that we understand the why behind every who, because that's what's going to shape the rest of our communication plan. Okay. Any other thoughts or input here before we move on? Nope. All right. You guys are easy. All right. So now that we've identified the sender and Schramm's model, the next step is the message itself. But before we can send a message, it needs to be encoded. Encoding is just a process where you take the thoughts out of your head and translate them into a form that can be delivered. And this takes us to the third question in our model, which is what? What do we need to convey in order to achieve the desired results? And this is where things get really strategic, okay? It's not just about sending any message, it's about sending the right message. And the content that we share should be clear, straightforward, and tailored to the persona that we're communicating with. And we really have to reference these in order, so who we're communicating with, the why, and those come together to give us the what. And we do want to make sure that every message has a call to action so that they know what's expected next. Once we get the message developed, we move to the next part of Schramm's model, which is the channel. And the message has been encoded, okay? So it just needs a path to travel from the sender to the receiver. And it can be anything from conversation to digital communication. We just want to make sure that we choose the right channel for the person we're trying to get to. So this leads us to the next question, which is how? How are we going to communicate the message? And this really focuses just on how we're going to deliver it so that it is received, understood, and acted on. Not just any way that we want to get it out. We want to make sure that it is strategically delivered as well as written. So I want to give you some information. This has always been really useful to me, something I loved when I went back to get my degree. But there are some very specific target populations for each channel. I want to share this with you guys. The first one is television. Television is an excellent channel to target older generations and those who are less likely to use the internet. Hulu is a type of television streaming, but it usually reaches a younger and more diverse audience. So that 25 to 54 range, and then very diverse ethnic groups. So this is much better for ethnic diversity. Radio is still pretty powerful for people that commute. People when they're not on their phones when they're driving usually. And it's shocking to me sometimes how many people just listen to local radio instead of listening to podcast or things like that. But still pretty effective, and it catches them when they're not on their phones, which is huge. But 35 to 64 years in commuters. We get to newspapers. It's still effective for some populations, especially older residents. You can also find business professionals and political figures use this. Another traditional but effective method is direct mail. I have never been a huge fan of this, but I don't know if you guys are getting it, but I'm in a swing state and we are just getting bombarded by political mail right now. It is just every time I open up the mailbox, there is just mail falling out from one
Same
side or the
here.
other, driving me nuts. But I think they like this because it's more tangible. People can hold it in their hand and it cuts through the digital noise. You know, we've got so many emails and texts, and this is another way just to get that in front of you. And yeah, it's irritating to me sometimes, but it does do its job, especially for those that it's intended for, those 50 plus. I'm getting dangerously close to that. Um, but also, it is a good method for getting your previous and potential donors as well. All right, moving into social media. Almost all the agencies that I work with have a Facebook page, and it is a good option when you're trying to reach people between the ages of 40 and 65. But keep in mind that not everybody uses Facebook. So you want to look a little bit beyond just that one media source, especially um, if you're trying to reach different age groups. Twitter is another option for younger populations. It's also pretty easy to engage with people. I've gotten responses from popular people on there, business professionals and stuff. So it's kind of cool for the way that you can get responses and get the attention of people. But I'm not liking it as much anymore. It has changed drastically. It is severely political these days. I still use it because that's where some of my clients hang out, and engaging in them on social media that works for my business. But I do not hang out on Twitter because it is so uber political. Instagram is a pretty neat place to target younger audiences, so 18 to 34. And I've seen some agencies get pretty creative with this one. So play around with it and think outside the box. TikTok is kind of similar. It even goes younger, down to 16 to 29 years old. Again, like Instagram, think outside the box and try to find ways that will really resonate with the target audience. The 16-year-old doesn't want a newscast. Okay. So don't do that. Make it fun, make it exciting, let them feel like you're cool. Okay. If that's what you're trying to reach that age group, whether you're cool or not, try to make them feel like you're cool. All right. LinkedIn. This is the last one I've got on social media here. There's some others that we could throw on, but LinkedIn is the best place to reach business professionals. This is another one that I use, and I get hits for my kind of work. You can reach out and get probably some politicians and political support, things like that on there. Some business owners. You can create your own content for LinkedIn. You can share other business related articles, things that resonate with the mission of your organization, just to keep people engaged and make sure that they are aware of what's important to you guys. All right. Have any of you guys found any channels that work better for you than others?
We recently had a job fair, and one of the questions asked on our registration for each person that entered was how they heard about our event.
Mhm.
And in our community, Facebook seems to be what most everybody responded,
Mhm.
that they heard about us either through our Facebook or by actually being in our office.
This is one of the things. I don't know if you guys do this or not, but I started putting this on the surveys when we send them out for community assessments. And that way, when they send it out, you get your basic demographic information from people. Then I also put what is the best social media or what is the best channel for reaching you, and we'll list all these out there. And it just gives information to the organization about how to reach each population, because as you filter out that data, you can see, well, my politicians are here and my partner organizations are here. So that's just a recommendation, but I found that to be good for me. Imelda says we're trying different things to improve our communication. We're working towards improving our social media presence as a communication strategy. That's awesome. That's why we're here today.
For me, real quick, one of the
Yeah.
things I observed is not only is it important to pay attention, on who your target audience is to determine which platform or which medium you use, but also the way I see it is just there are so many options. So depending on the objective of your communications, it may be of value and benefit to, hit multiple of those media options.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it cut out for a minute, so I cut my video off to see if it would catch up. When the internet's slow, sometimes Zoom has to be be adjusted. All right, I'm going to move on. Takes us to the next element of Schramm's model, noise. And noise basically refers to any interference that distorts or disrupts the message that's being communicated. Different types of noises. First of all, you've got physical noise. Sometimes I run into this when I'm teaching at conferences. You hear people talking in the hallway or traffic outside or construction noise. Even something as simple as music playing in the background can sometimes make it hard for people to focus and comprehend the message. Psychological noise, this is what's going on in the mind of the receiver. So if they're worried about something, they're stressed, or if they've got prejudices, that can cause the receiver to misinterpret or overlook the message that you're trying to send. Semantic noise, this is when the language or terminology we use creates confusion. So technical jargon, industry specific terms, difference in language, this can create communication barriers. And then finally, there's cultural noise. Cultural noise encompasses the differences in cultural norms and values and beliefs and even race and ethnicity. So it can be part of how things are being received and understood. I took a whole course on cultural communication, and as accepting as I felt like I am, definitely come a long way from growing up in Appalachia. You find out how much further you have to go when you're in a course like that because things are just interpreted differently. All right. Now, the reason that noise is a problem is that it can interfere with the way that the receiver decodes the message. So encoding was taking our thoughts and putting them into a message, and decoding is doing the opposite, okay? Turning the message into thoughts. And our goal is that our message will be interpreted exactly the way that we meant for it to be, okay? But sometimes that's not the case. And even small things can impact the way that messages are decoded. For example, I want you to look at this and just think if you sent in a resume that had a coffee stain on it, regardless of how qualified you are, regardless of the contents of that resume, you're probably not going to get the job because all they're going to see is that coffee stain. It's going to impact the communication. Even the shapes that you use can be a form of communication. Circles represent unity and community and wholeness. Squares, rectangles convey stability and reliability and structure. Triangles are interesting because they signify action, but the orientation can make a difference. If it points up or to the right, it can suggest growth. If it's pointing down or to the left, it could signify instability. Even the fonts we use are a form of communication. So if you use a font like this one in a report, it's probably not going to be taken seriously. It may work on a Head Start newsletter or something, but definitely not on anything official. For reports, you want something that's slick and clean and professional. But even the colors you use can be a form of communication. So yellow is linked with optimism and clarity and warmth. Red can be associated with energy and urgency and passion, but sometimes can be considered aggressive or confrontational. If you'll notice, my logo is blue because it communicates trust and calmness and professionalism. And I really don't have time to talk a great deal about branding, but just for reference, I want to show you the difference between a couple of logos. And I hope this isn't one of yours, but the first one is from an active community action agency. If you'll notice, the colors are kind of outdated. The clarity of the image is bad. So if you've got a logo that's pixelated and distorted and outdated looking, you may never be seen as professional. by some groups. So that's important to look at. And just to compare, look at the 60th anniversary logo. So it uses colors that grab your attention. It feels modern and clean, professional. And all of this really makes a huge difference on how your message is decoded. So it's important to think about even these, just the smallest of details. All right, so back to Schramm's model. We started talking about the sender and the receiver, and I talked more about the receiver end of things, but I want to hit just a minute on the sender's role, because they have the responsibility of shaping the message. And in an organization, the organization itself is not talking, but you've got to find out who in the organization is going to give the message. So really important to start thinking about who the best person is. So in some cases, a board member may be the best person to communicate because they have political connections in some cases. In other situations, maybe a Head Start parent would be the best person. They can tell a personal story that really brings people in before you get even into the statistics. So think about who the sender is within the organization itself. Another factor we want to look at is when. Timing can make or break how effective your organization is received. So sending the right message at the wrong time can reduce its impact or cause it to be completely overlooked. And the second part of this, of course, is the frequency. And I want to hit these real quick too. If we look at social media platforms, Facebook, the algorithms on Facebook, you really want to get a post in there, at least 1 to 2 a day. If you post too much on Facebook, you may overload your audience and dilute the engagement of each post. So 1 to 2 is about all you need. Timing is pretty important as well. Early mornings and late evenings tend to be the prime times for Facebook. Twitter is a little bit different. So its algorithms, the lifespan of the tweets is only about 15 to 20 minutes. So the more frequently you post, the better. And repetition's okay. Variety is good too, though. So just get as much out there as frequently as you can, and that's how you're going to get seen. Instagram, you're looking at 1 to 2 high quality posts each day, and their algorithms prioritize visually appealing, engaging content because the posts stick around for a while. So focus on quality over quantity when you're looking at Instagram. And TikTok thrives on viral content. So more frequent posting on TikTok actually helps increase your chances of reaching a larger audience. So about 1 to 3 posts per day is good here. LinkedIn, this is all about professionalism. So once a day is enough on LinkedIn. Just make sure your message adds value to the intended audience, or they're going to start tuning you out over time. And finally, YouTube. I didn't talk about YouTube earlier, but it's actually kind of a cool channel. You can do some neat stuff on, especially educationally. For these, though, you want to use quality videos, long form content. I would edit it out so it's good content, and you only have to do 1 to 2 a week of these to stay relevant. And it does matter if you're consistent. You're going to get more people if you say, I'm going to post this every Tuesday or something like that. So kind of keep that in mind. I recommend using a tool like Zoho Social or Hootsuite or Buffer or Sprout Social. My company uses Zoho Social. I really love the flexibility. This allows us to really spend 1 day a month working on social media instead of having to worry about it every day or every week. So we go through and we get all of our posts, create the graphics, whatever we're going to do for each media, and then we schedule when it's going to go out and how frequently. You schedule the dates, which mediums it's going to, which communication channels it's going to. So it's pretty cool.
What was the name of that again?
This is Zoho Social.
Zoho Social?
Zoho, Zoho. Hootsuite is another really popular one,
Yeah, we've heard of that one.
HOOTSUITE, and Sprout Social. I'm a big Zoho fan, so we do everything, our invoicing and everything on Zoho. So it's really my favorite. Did I lose you guys?
No.
Okay, you all froze up, so I'm going to cut my face off a minute. All right. I'm going to speed up just a little bit because I want to make sure that you guys get to the end of the content before we run out of time. I want to finish up Schramm's model by looking at the concept of feedback. Lee Iacocca, you guys probably remember Lee Iacocca, former Chrysler CEO. He's a guy that saved Chrysler, is what they call him. But he once said that business people need to listen at least as much as they need to talk. And I believe it really is important that we are intentional to make sure that we have an open channel to listen to what's being said in response to our messages. For the last couple of years, I've really been captivated by a Japanese management process called Hoshin Kanri. Have you guys heard of Hoshin Kanri? I love Hoshin Kanri. But one of the tools associated with Hoshin Kanri is a concept called catch ball. And kind of to explain this, imagine a game of catch between two people. And as one person throws the ball, the other has to catch it and throw it back. And so communication really involves the same process of you're sharing ideas, they're sending it back to you. And in this process, it really is intended for internal communication. So ideas travel up and down the hierarchy, but I like to adapt this and use it for external communication as well. So you can use it with funders and partners and community members. And it just really gives you that open communication back and forth. So you see what's relevant and what's working and what's not working. All right, so that completes Schramm's model. And here you can see the model in its completion with all of the elements that we've covered today. The sender identifies the receiver and encodes the message, being aware of potential noise that could impact the way the message is received. The most appropriate channel is selected to ensure the message is received, and a channel is made for feedback as well. And it seems pretty simple, and it honestly kind of is, but there's a lot of details that you want to consider as you start digging into this process. And as a gift to you guys, if you're interested, I want to give you a copy of our strategic communication plan worksheets. Really includes all the different things that we talked about today. And I'm going to pull up a QR code if you guys want this. You can scan there. I'll also make sure this gets back to CalCappa as well when I send the slide copies. But it's just an Excel form that I've created. But if you want to scan it, you can get it ahead of time. And I'm going to give you guys one last opportunity to ask questions if you've got anything or throw out any comments.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean, especially for that free gift. That framework's going to go a long way for those of us who take advantage of it. I wanted to shed some light. Imelda had a question in the chat. Going back to social media real quick, if there are specific days that you're aware of where posting can reach more audience on Facebook?
I would have to look back at the algorithms because I've actually got books on this. And it's going to be different for me. Like I have found in my software, it actually tells me what days my audience is best to reach for each one. So I can actually set it to reach, like it'll say, do you want me to post this at the best time for your audience? I don't even have to think about that, but your audience is going to be different than my audience.
Yeah,
because my audience is you guys. Yeah. So if you're trying to reach customers, you really are going to have to kind of think about when they're available.
Sure.
And like I said, like with Facebook, usually people get up in the morning and they check Facebook, and whether we like to admit this or not, usually they go to work and get their coffee and they check Facebook on the clock, of course. And then, lunchtime is another time, I would say. And this is just, you start thinking about work patterns for people who are working, people who are not working. It may be a little bit different. Senior citizens, like my mother-in-law's in her 70s, and usually I see that she's on at night. For some reason, she has nothing to do all day long, but she's usually on Facebook at like 8, 9 o'clock at night before bed. So
yeah, I posted a link in the chat that I use for figuring out what are the best dates and times to post.
Oh, great.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you, Andy. I see that.
You're welcome.
See, that's why you're in here. Does that mean I have to share? Does that mean I have to share my check with you?
That would be nice.
All right,
All
any
right,
other
anything
questions
else?
while we've got Sean, guys? All right, well, Sean, I'm sure everyone else will agree with me, but this has been a very fruitful training,
Yes.
eye-opening, and to the point, I'll say. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your
Yeah, absolutely.
expertise and doing what you do. For everyone, I'm going to drop the link in the chat right now for our survey for the training. You know, what you thought of it, what you thought of Sean's performance. And this is very important for us to host future trainings. So please take a brief moment to complete that. It'll take less than 5 minutes, I promise. And I think I'll just go over my notes, but I think that's about it.
And honestly, I would love to see any recommendations or any areas that you guys feel would be beneficial for you to understand the subject better. Because I'm always like to poll the people I'm working with to see, okay, this is the basics, which is hard to cover everything you want to cover in an hour anyway. But I always like to see where you like to dig deeper.
Thank you for adding that in.
Mhm.
Excellent. Well, yeah, make sure you guys, reach out to Sean for any AI needs as well. As he said, he is working really hard to be at the top of that, the lead of the AI movement. And yeah, thank you so much once again, Sean. Thank you everyone for attending. Please take a moment to fill out the survey and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
All right. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.